Every once in a while, I smell ivory soap. And as soon as I smell it, as soon as I catch that first whiff of ivory soap, I'm transported back in time many, many, many years ago to when I was a teenager and would spend a couple of weeks each summer at my grandparent Grove's house, my mom's mom and dad. That smell takes me back because my grandmother used ivory soap everywhere. She had it at the kitchen sink. It was at the bathroom sink. It was in the shower. It was in the bathtub. It was everywhere you needed soap in the house. It was ivory soap. And it's not particularly a smell I like, but it's just the smell that every time I catch a whiff of it, it takes me back. It takes me back to fond memories. It takes me back to a place where I was welcomed, where I was loved, where I was valued. It takes me to a place where I learned much about life, about myself, and about family. It's amazing to me how just one whiff of a certain smell can do that for you. It's a cheap time machine. It wasn't ivory soap, but I'm sure the whiff of smoke that day after Jesus' resurrection, when Jesus appeared to the disciples on the beach as he was cooking breakfast over a charcoal fire, took Peter back in time, not to a pleasant time, but a time when he was huddling to keep warm around a fire while Jesus was being interrogated in front of the high priest, and a time when Peter was asked if he knew who Jesus was or if he was one of Jesus' followers, and 2 times in a row, for the second and third time, Peter denied knowing who Jesus was. The whiff of smoke that morning as Jesus, the resurrected Jesus, was cooking breakfast on the beach, as he called to Peter and the other disciples to come to him and join him, that whiff of smoke, I am sure, took Peter back to a time, an event he would like to forget. And lucky for Peter, something amazing was about to happen. As he stands there after fishing all night and catching nothing, and then a few moments after listening to Jesus' instructions to cast the net on the other side of the boat, and he caught 153 large fish, John tells us. Something more amazing than that large catch of fish after catching nothing all night is about to take place. And I can't help but wonder if Jesus is being intentional here with the fire, knowing that the whiff of smoke will transport Peter back just a few days earlier. And it will make the experience of grace that he's about to experience all the sweeter and so much more meaningful. Before we explore that, did you notice something weird going on here in this passage as Pastor Sharon read it and as it was on the screen? Anybody notice? You smelled something? Well, I didn't smell that, and that wasn't the near. And we'll just keep you out of the doghouse, Rob. It was something in the passage, something in the words, something in the story, the way John told it. John says in verse 9, he says, when the disciples got ashore, they found that breakfast was waiting for them. Fish were cooking over a charcoal fire with some bread. And Jesus said to the disciples, bring some fish that you just caught. Now, what's going on there? I mean, Jesus didn't catch these fish yet. He had fish and he was cooking breakfast. He had breakfast cooked, basically. And yet he said to the disciples, bring some fish. Well, he didn't need them. Hang on to that. We'll circle back in a few moments. Peter did what Peter vowed he would never do. He denied knowing Jesus. He let Jesus down. And that whiff of smoke takes him back to that very moment. I'm sure of it. Just like the whiff of ivory soap takes me back to my grandmother's house. I haven't been there for years. But if I smell ivory soap, I'm right back in her bathroom or in her kitchen as a teenager. And those days are long past. So I'm sure that this whiff of smoke for Peter took him back. And it's not quite as far. I mean, it's only a couple of days, a little bit of time that this takes him back. But I'm sure that that whiff of smoke takes him back to that moment where he denied knowing Jesus. That was then, and this is now. Peter and the other disciples had returned to fishing just days after Jesus left them. Previously, Jesus had taught them about being on mission for God. And just a day or so ago, in fact, the very day, Easter Day, later in the afternoon, after the disciples had experienced the resurrected Jesus, they're behind locked doors, and Jesus meets them again. And he says to them, Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I'm sending you. And then he breathed on them and said, Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive anyone's sins, they are forgiven. And if you don't forgive them, they are not forgiven. And yet here we find Peter and the disciples reverting back to what they knew and who they were before they had encountered Jesus. They're fishing. And a double yet, they were experienced fishermen. And they hadn't caught a thing. All night long they fished and got nothing. It wasn't until they listened to Jesus' instructions from the shore that they caught 153 fish. Now, I am so grateful, brothers and sisters, that Jesus meets us right where we are, just as we are. He trained them for a mission, and yet they were back doing what they did before the training. But Jesus doesn't get mad. He doesn't throw a fit. He doesn't abandon them. He doesn't walk off in anger. No. He meets them right where they are, right as they are. He knows how easy it is for us to get distracted. He knows how easy it is to lose sight of the mission, to veer off course. Yet instead of punishing them and us, He meets us right where we are, right as we are, and He extends grace to us. There's moment after moment after moment of grace in this story that I don't want you to miss. Jesus wants to be sure that we get it. Part of why Jesus asks Peter 3 times, "Do you love me?" It's not a punishment. Like write 100 times, "I love you." You know, I've done that many times. Not 100 times, "I love you," but 150 times, "I will not disrupt the teacher." I've written it on the bulletin board or the chalkboard, and I've written it on a piece of paper and had to hand it in later. I've done that many times, but this isn't that kind of thing. Jesus isn't asking him 3 times because he has to say, "I love you" 3 times because he's been bad. He's asking him 3 times, I think, because he wants Peter to get it. Here's grace. Here's grace. Here's grace. 3 times after Peter declares his love for Jesus, 3 times Jesus reorients Peter to the mission, to love the world. 3 times Jesus makes it clear that Peter still has value and worth. 3 times Jesus makes it clear that Peter still has a vital role to play in the work of Jesus in the world. And if it isn't clear from this, circle back with me to the fish. The fish that Jesus had cooking, and the request to bring more fish to the fire. And the fact that Jesus allowed them to catch so many fish after catching zero is a moment of grace. I mean, he could have said, hey, serves you right. You shouldn't have been back there anyhow. That's why I didn't let you catch anything in the first place. But no. When they said they didn't catch anything, he said, throw your net on the right side of the boat and you'll catch some fish. And they caught 153 large fish, so many that they couldn't pull the net in, and yet the net didn't break. Moment of grace. The fact that Jesus said, bring fish, and he already had fish cooking, communicates with us that he wants us to be involved in his mission. He didn't need Peter's fish, but he wanted to let Peter and us know that we can contribute what we have to the mission. Not only can Jesus use us, but he can use what we have too. And that's grace. You see, no matter what you've done, no matter where you've been, no matter who you are or who someone tells you you are, Jesus can and wants to use you in the mission of God in the world. It starts with hearing his voice. He's calling out to you. He's inviting you to come have breakfast, to bring what you have. That invitation to come and eat with him is another moment of grace. It took them back to times when they ate with Jesus before. And there's this, we know it's him, but we don't know it's him, or we're wondering, is it really him going on in this passage? And in each of the encounters with Jesus after the resurrection. And so when they break bread, when they eat together, there's an instant recognition that that's Jesus. And so it's a moment of grace for the disciples. Once we respond to Jesus' invitation, he extends grace to us. He says, come and eat with me. He says, do you love me? If you do, love others. Do you love me? If you do, then show it by the way you live your very lives. Do you love me? If you do, receive the forgiveness and the grace that I extend to you and extend it to other people. Because it's not really grace if we just receive it. It's only grace when we've received it and extend it to others. Jesus tells many parables that make that point very clear. No matter where you have been, brothers and sisters, no matter what you have done, no matter who you are or who someone says you are, Jesus loves you. That's one of the messages of this passage. Jesus meets you right where you are, as you are, and he extends grace to you. And he invites you to join him on his mission. And his mission is to love the world. Jesus sends us out into the world as the Father has sent him, to love, to forgive, to bless. And anytime you doubt your value or your worth to God, I pray, brothers and sisters, that something happens and you catch a whiff of that smoke. And that you're reminded of the grace that God has and extends to you. Because no matter where you've been, no matter what you've done, no matter who you believe yourself to be or someone has said you are beloved by God, worth every bit and valued by God. And he wants you and needs you to participate in the mission to love the world, to extend his grace to the world. But you got to receive it first. God's not up there waiting for us to fail. He wants us to succeed. He wants us to recognize the value that we have in his eyes. He wants to extend his grace to us, and he wants us to extend his grace to one another and to the world. I'm grateful that Jesus meets us right where we are, right as we are. And I'm grateful for the moments in life where I smell and you smell the whiff of smoke, because it reminds us that God's grace comes to us again and again and again. Thanks be to God for His grace. Now, how do you want to interact